We're not used to like
We're
starting
not
going to
do the rocket, and we're not going to do the armor song. So I guess we just introduce them.
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and introduce our guest that we have here, Jim Modlin.
Great. Well, thanks. It's great to be here. My name is Jim Modlin. I'm the Deputy Commandant of the U.S. Army Armor School down at Fort Moore, Georgia. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
You bet. How was it? Were you there during the change then in terms of Fort Benning to Fort Moore?
I wasn't. I got here, or I got to Fort Moore right after that, right after the renaming. But I got to say, we feel incredibly fortunate down at Fort Moore to have had the opportunity to rename our post after both General and Mrs. Moore. I think we're the only installation in the Army that's actually named after an Army couple, which is sort of a big deal for us.
Yeah.
And the renaming itself was a huge success, both for us and the city of Columbus.
You won't take any offense if I still refer to it as Fort Benning.
It happens. You slip up every once in a while. But,
I spent so much time there. It's really hard for you as well. You spent some time there.
yeah.
Sure.
And not being able to call it that. It's sort of like calling the home of the armor not Fort Knox.
Yes, it is a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, but we like it. We like to say when you come to Fort Moore, you can be more. So that's our little catchphrase.
Yeah, look at that. They're getting good at branding.
There's my plug.
They're marketing. Yeah.
So we want to get into your background a little bit, but we also want to get into some of the stuff that's going on currently today within the military. So in terms of you, where's home?
Home's a little bit of everywhere. I'm an Army brat.
Are you? Okay.
So yeah, my dad was a career officer, moved around all over the place, went to high school in New Jersey. So I do claim New Jersey as home. I'm a New York Jets fan, unfortunately. But shortly after graduating high school, went to West Point. Never really looked back. I've been in 22 years now, and looking towards retiring in a couple of years. So
okay. So did you choose to go to West Point because of your military background? I'm just curious, like what?
Yes. So we lived up there in the 80s. When I was a kid, my dad was an instructor up there. And I think that's when I sort of had the idea in my mind. That's where I wanted to go. It's really the only college I applied to in high school. I sort of had my mind set that's where I was going to go. And I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was a really good experience and definitely set me towards the path of being a career officer.
What sport did you play?
Intramurals, so intramural football.
There you go.
Doesn't everybody have to pick something?
Yes. If you're not playing a core squad, a D1 sport, everybody has to do something. So I played intramurals. It was a little too slow, a little too small to make the football team. So the intramurals was it for me.
Did you do anything in the summers as far as training prior to?
I did. So in addition to the normal cadet summer training things, I had the opportunity to go to airborne school as a cadet, CTLT in Korea with 2nd Tank, which was awesome. I did another CTLT in Kuwait, actually, in the summer of 01, so right before September 11th.
Wow.
And then my class, I was a senior at West Point when September 11th happened.
Somebody's going to ask what that acronym is. So.
Oh, CTLT, Cadet Troop Leader Training. It's when a cadet goes off and pretends to be a platoon leader for a little bit.
Circles come to your formation.
Yes.
Who do you think is like the best candidate for West Point? Like if they want to join the Army, they want to be an Army officer, like who's best suited for West Point?
Oh, great. Yeah. I think high school students that are very well-rounded. So good students, not necessarily the valedictorian, though we certainly get a lot of those. An athlete, varsity athletes, tend to do well in the military. Someone that's civic-minded, involved in a lot of clubs. Student government individuals tend to do really well. But yeah, definitely looking for somebody that isn't necessarily the best at one particular thing, but really good at a lot of different things.
I was going to say, isn't that kind of one of the things that's kind of sort of like a prerequisite? It's almost like you just ran through all of those things you have to check the block on in terms of
very true. Yeah,
but
very true.
So inversely, who would be not good suited for West Point and should just go the ROTC route?
I really think that has so I think the types of people that we're looking for to be officers in general embody those traits. Yeah. So really it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. Whether West Point is something that a high school kid feels like would be a good fit for them, I think is more important. We have great officers that come out of ROTC. We have great officers that just go to college and decide they want to go to OCS. It really, I think, has to do more with the individual than any particular trait that they have.
I've always been curious on like the enlisted side, like why they chose the academy or not, especially if they had all the qualities to be able to go to the academy if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's a free education. So that's nice too.
Yeah.
Is it still the track then? Like if you do go to the academy, you have a better chance of getting a star?
Oh, I don't know.
Or 06?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the numbers on that.
Come on, Jim, you're being modest.
I'm not sure. It worked for me. Yeah, I mean, I've worked for phenomenal officers that have come from all different kinds of commissioning sources, and I've worked for some really bad West Point officers as well. So
I think they get a bad rap because of the bad ones. You know what I mean? Because if you're if you're an 03, 04 and you're leaning on the fact that you went to West Point and not off your merit from being an 01, 02, then you've missed the boat.
Yeah, it's really rare in a professional setting where anybody's actually asked me where I went to college, what my GPA was, what my major was, or anything along those lines. Maybe as a lieutenant, but certainly after that.
And it was probably just a smart-ass section leader asking you what your GPA was.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
That relationship of LT and staff sergeant is probably one of my favorites.
Oh, loved it. Yes.
This dude's 10 years in. This dude's been here. He went to A-Bullock. So
yes.
It's awesome.
Absolutely.
What made you choose the branch you end up going into? You end up going into armor, right?
First choice?
Yes, of course.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you
absolutely.
go.
So CTLT is what did it. My time in second tank.
Okay. So at that time frame, you were where? Where did you end up going to get that experience?
So that they were in Korea still. So it was still when we had forces in Korea, and really when the opportunities for summer training came about, I remember going to my TAC NCO and wanting to do something that wasn't in the U.S. So the idea of being able to go to Korea I was 19, 20 years old at the time. It just seemed exciting. It seemed like it was the real Army. And it was. I was able to get out there. And
did you do a gunnery rotation?
I did 2 gunneries.
There you
Absolutely.
go. There you go.
It was great. 2 gunneries, time and soul. That was pretty much all that I did during my time there. But it was phenomenal. It was a really great experience, and it definitely gave me a taste of what I thought the real Army was going to be like.
Yeah. So where did they put you though in the tank?
So the first one, I was the loader.
Oh,
nice.
good. That's
Yes.
good. That's probably where I would have put you.
I was the loader, and then we shot gunnery with that unit, and I forget what companies it was, but it was like Alpha and Bravo were shooting, and then Charlie and Delta were coming afterwards, or some variation of that. And one of the other companies was missing a platoon leader, so they asked, "Hey, would you like to just shoot another gunnery as a PL?" And absolutely jumped at the opportunity. And
so you got to command a tank at CTLT
absolutely
in a live fire gunnery.
live fire. Yep.
and a platoon at that time frame?
Well, it was just gunnery.
Just for gunnery. He hot seated.
Exactly.
The driver and the loader and the gunner needed to qualify.
But you still need to know the command.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And that's the last gunnery I have shot on a tank.
Driver move out.
Something like that.
I'm
Driver
trying to
up.
remember.
Driver up.
It's been a
driver
while,
seat defilade.
Driver stop, gunner take over, something. I mean, oh my God, I can remember some of the commands. They're just very vague.
If Jarvis was here, he knows all those things.
Yeah,
He
I'm sure
goes
he'd
through
be
them.
like spouting them off and everything. So you went armor. Where'd you go right after the academy?
So went to the basic course, and then immediately after that, RAC was kicking off. So they accelerated everybody through, and I reported to 19 Cav in 3rd Brigade of the 1st Cavalry Division, and became a platoon leader.
Is that Gary Owen?
Headhunters.
Okay.
Gary Owen's 7th Cav.
7th Cav. Okay.
Yeah, and then we were set to go to Egypt for Bright Star for the observer rotation, and were alerted that we were surging more troops into Iraq. This was summer of 03, and then by September of 03, I was in Iraq, just west of Fallujah, a place called Chaldea, so right in between Ramadi and Fallujah. And
As a second lieutenant.
as a second lieutenant. Yep.
Crossed the berm as a second lieutenant.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
pretty sweet.
Yep. Had been a platoon leader for just a couple months at that point. But it's, when I tell people about it, I was so lucky as a platoon leader to fall in on the platoon that I had. You mentioned the section sergeants. I easily had the best platoon sergeant in the battalion, a guy named Leonard Ortega. He had been a Desert Storm vet, longtime 82nd guy, who was just great, great mentor for me. And I had 4 section sergeants, squad leaders, all very, very experienced staff sergeants. Just a really good group. And it didn't dawn on me until years later just how lucky I was, to have that platoon. They allowed me to learn as a young officer. They allowed me to lead, but with some control measures in place to make sure the young LT wasn't doing something dumb.
At that time, like cognitively, I'm just thinking about it as an adolescent, just like cognitively as an adolescent. Were you like endearing of it at the time of their mentorship to you, like for your actual field?
Both. I think I was more afraid of letting them down than anything. Like I was definitely more concerned about one of them getting hurt or killed because of a mistake I made or not being good enough. They deserved the best leadership. And that I remember that level of stress back then.
That expectation on your own self.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, but yeah, that was a very, that was a tough tour. That the battalion I was attached to at the time, 134 Armor, very, very high casualty rates, especially amongst the leaders. There was one of the companies, their Charlie company, all three of their original platoon leaders, 2 were wounded, had to go back home, 1 was killed, and then the replacements, sort of same thing happened to them. I got wounded a couple times that deployment. I want to say we had right about a 50% Purple Heart rate in my platoon. One of the other platoon leaders in my company, prior service Ranger Regiment guy, had a couple Purple Hearts as well. So it was when all the bad things started happening in Iraq. We got there in the fall of 2003. We thought things were calming down. The winter, things definitely slowed down, and all of a sudden these IEDs started happening, and the car bombs started happening, and Sadr started doing his thing, and Ramadi and Fallujah and all that happened. So by the time I redeployed in September of 2004, I had a very skewed view of what Iraq was. It was very, very limited to just that small snapshot of in between Ramadi and Fallujah and a little bit of time in Baghdad.
Yeah. So was most of the fatalities and stuff due to IEDs, or was it the...
Early it was IEDs. My company got hit with we didn't even realize what it was at the time. It ended up being one of the first VBIDs that happened, one of the first car bombs, which killed 3 of the soldiers in our 3rd platoon. We had a platoon sergeant that actually got shot down in a helicopter and was killed in that one, small arms fire. Helicopters were starting to shot down in that area back then. I'm sure you remember. And then that was it for my company in terms of KIA. Wounded, IEDs, RPGs, some small arms fire. And then in some of the other companies in the battalion task force, snipers were becoming an issue in the cities back then. And then the ever-present IEDs then. They just seemed to only get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. So where'd you end up going after your time at Hood?
Sure. So we redeployed. It was the company XO by that point, and then went to the career course. So back to Fort Knox and did the career course. And at that point, the Army was changing our structure, and the infantry brigade combat teams were getting light cav formations. And my first deployment had actually been on gun trucks, so soft skin gun trucks, and they were looking for anybody that had experience with that at that point, and they offered up some of the IBCTs, and it was, I think for my class, it was Hawaii, Alaska, and I want to say Campbell, and I ended up going to Hawaii in the 25th Infantry Division. Nice.
Were you in the soft skin trucks?
No, we were in MRAPs and MATVs.
Okay.
Yeah, my 3rd deployment. We were doing that,
So how was Hawaii? A lot of people get rock fever. For you, what was it?
I liked it. So I've been stationed, or I've been assigned to the 25th 6 total years, 4 as a captain, and then 2 later on as a lieutenant colonel. I enjoyed Hawaii. I like the island. I think if you sort of embrace the aloha spirit and do the things the locals do, eat the things the locals eat, that type of stuff. Stay away from Waikiki. You'll be okay. But it's definitely good in small bites, though. I don't know if I could live there for forever. but I do hope to go back at some point.
Yeah. So I need to say how it is that I met you and how that you got onto the show, because it's a kind of wild story. I was actually in the Delta Suites at the Braves game, and I'm sitting there, and we're on the right behind between first base and, well, we're actually right behind the dugout. So right behind home plate and in that area on that side. And so I'm sitting there, and of course I'm having a few beers and enjoying the game. And all of a sudden they stop, and like they typically do, and they announce whether a veteran is there and talk about the individual and all of that. That veteran happened to be Jim, and he ran out there, and everybody cheered. And of course my wife automatically poked me and said, "You need to stop him as he comes out and get his info." And so I did. I stopped him and shook his hand and everything as he was going out the door. I tried to chase you, as a matter of fact. They escorted you right through the Delta Suite
absolutely.
and out big time. What did they do? Put you up in the nosebleed at that point? Or?
No, they took me back so I can get out of uniform is what it was. And then I had my youngest son, who's 11, with me. So he was right behind home plate. So watching the whole thing, I was like, hey, I need to get back to Thomas. So let's just get back there and watch the rest of the game. He's our big baseball fan. So, yeah.
So the cops are right behind me, and I ran out, and I'm like, which way did he go? And he goes, he went into the main doors here. And so I took off, and I ran into there, and I was looking around, and you didn't even get anything to eat. They just moved you right on through.
They did.
And wasn't able to catch up with you at that point. So what I did is, of course, I stalked you, I think, on LinkedIn. And found you there, and that's how you ended up here. So, man, it's
he saw you out of his corner of his eye. He's like, someone's running after me.
Well, he probably thought, who the hell is this guy? I'm sure it was one of those weird things anyway.
It was nice. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
No, it's really cool that you were, mentioned in that way and able to be acknowledged the way you were at that game. So
the Braves are great. They do a ton with us, and we just really appreciate all the support they've given both to the military and our veteran community.
Yeah,
they do it right.
So now, though, you're sitting as the Deputy Commandant.
I am.
A TRADOC training for armor, cavalry. What all is it entail?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so technically, I'm the Deputy Commandant of the United States Army Armor School at Fort Moore, Georgia, as part of the Maneuver Center of Excellence.
There you go.
So my boss, the Commandant, is responsible for all of the armor training, everything from OSIT, the one station unit training, so our new privates that come in as civilians, and we turn them into cavalry scouts and armored crewmen. He's responsible for our NCO professional development that we do at Fort Moore, as well as all of our officer PME, so our professional military education. So we have the basic course, the Armor Basic Officer Leader course. We have the Captain's Career course, which we share with infantry. And then we run pre-command courses as well for lieutenant colonels and colonels getting ready to be battalion and brigade commanders.
Master Gunner's there?
Yep, Master Gunner's there. We have a ton of functional training. Everything from not necessarily under the armor school, but at Fort Moore, Ranger School, Airborne School, Sniper School, a ton of other functional things that are there. But yes, the Master Gunner School is one of the hallmarks of the Armor School.
And when did you take over that position?
4th of July of last year. So just at a year. Yes.
There you go. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. I haven't gotten fired yet, so it's good.
What's the typical turn?
They like to keep the deputy commandants for about 3.
Okay.
How do you like being on the training side of the house compared to like the actual active duty?
It's so different.
Not active duty, but operational side.
It's really different, but it's really great.
Right.
Every day I get to see young soldiers and young officers that are just super motivated and ready to go out and lead America's sons and daughters.
Yeah, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah, they really are. I had the good fortune of being able to be the guest speaker at the Armor Basic Officer Leader course graduation just a couple weeks ago, and just looking at these kids in the eye as they're coming across the stage, super proud, super motivated. It made me feel really old. That they look a lot closer to my kids than to me, but it gave me a lot of hope. They're very. The quality of individual that we're bringing into the military right now is phenomenal, and I couldn't be prouder of what they're doing.
So you think when people are socially saying that we have a softer military, or that like the Gen Z population coming in is like more woke, what would you have to say to that since you're training them?
Come visit us at Fort Moore and see the products for yourself. I think we are turning out a better quality individual both privates and officers than when I was coming out. So I know the basic course is harder than when I went through. I know the career course is harder than when I went through. Yes, standards and things are always evolving. I would argue that we have a better PT test now than we did when I was coming in the Army. And I think just across the board.
When you say the PT test, you think that it's measuring fitness at a more accurate scale?
Holistic fitness. I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yes. Yeah, definitely. And then, in terms of the generational aspect of it, I think every generational change we see in the military comes with, pros and cons, pluses and minuses. I would imagine the World War II generation would probably say the same thing about the Vietnam generation about my generation. So I don't think one is better or worse. I think there's definitely some differences with the younger generation, how they process information, how they learn. They're certainly more technologically savvy than I am. Maybe they didn't grow up playing baseball and football like we did to the same extent. But some of the strengths they bring to the force are definitely there, and I'm very confident in their ability to sort of take the torch from my generation.
I got a Are there any meatheads left? Are there like? Are there meatheads?
Totally.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Just,
absolutely.
Just making sure there still are some guys.
There are.
Okay.
There are.
All right.
There are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like a guy's like, you're going to be a great armor crewman because you pick heavy stuff up. And
Absolutely.
Then,
Absolutely.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, I do have to say that the single biggest thing, though, that sort of drives success, I think, in the military, certainly in the training base, is just their desire to be there.
Yeah.
You can see the people that want it, that really believe they're part of something bigger than themselves. And, I would imagine the same reason why, most of us joined as well. That sort of sense of being part of something bigger, and that service, really matters. And you can see it with them. And you can see it in their families too. I don't remember my family really showing up to a lot of graduations. Like I remember my dad being there to pin on my jump wings type of thing, but I wasn't really inviting them to come show up to things. But if you go to a bullet graduation or OSIT graduation, the stands are packed with families, and you can just see the pride that parents and siblings have in what these what these young kids are doing. It's really nice. It really makes me feel good to see it.
Do you think that's because the GWAT generation catered to make themselves more known to the public? I
don't know. Maybe. I do wonder if we maybe took that a little too far, just a little bit. But I do wonder if it's just how parenting maybe has changed a little bit. I know I tend to be more of a helicopter parent, even though I said I didn't want to be, where I'm always affirming, how wonderful my children are in all things. So I think I'm part of the problem as well. But it's good to see. And for whatever the reason is, it makes me really happy when I watch them.
That's nice to hear, honestly.
Yeah. It's refreshing. Someone that has an inside look at it from this 30,000 foot view, you get to see, you have a special angle in which you get to see these things. You get to see, obviously, the enlisted and the officer side. Yeah. How is the mixed gender taking place with the officers and the basic training? Or the OSA, the one station unit. Are you seeing any more female, participation? Because it's optional now, right? It's their choice. They it's not.
Sure. I can speak more to the officer side than I can about the enlisted side, just based on my background. And I can say that the women that we have that are choosing armor branch are doing just exceptionally well. Yeah. And it's going to be a number of years before we grow battalion and brigade commanders. But sort of as a subgroup, as a sub-cohort, the women that we have that are in company command and that are leaving company command are performing at such a high level.
To their male peers?
Relative to their peers. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. And I think a lot of that is just the drive, the desire to be there, choosing it for the right reasons. Yeah. I don't believe in forcing anybody into a combat arms branch. No. I think that should be a choice. And when you choose to do that, you can tell that to me, just that
intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That means so much.
Yes.
That's at least 50%.
Wanting to be there, you could either have a bad day at the range or you can have a great day at the range. It's all what you
certainly. And I definitely think, a female armor officer can probably answer this question better than I can, since I don't have that same experience as they do. I think as a branch, we're getting a lot better. I think we have fixed a number of the problems that we had early on. I won't say that, we're completely, we've got it all figured out, but I do think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Would you say there's any like nuances with how these female officers lead compared to their male peers that you see?
Honestly, and again, my experience is limited with this. I think our female officers that just show up and do their best, and their platoons, their companies see them caring about the soldiers, trying their hardest, trying to lead the right way. It's really that simple. It's the same thing with a male officer.
It's the same exact thing. That's
Same
all
thing.
you want.
Yeah.
You want a commander that's going to be a dog for you. You know what I mean? You want one that's going to fight for you, whether they're male or female.
Technically and tactically proficient, has high character, is going to go to bat for your units, is going to be able to, do the right thing the right way for the right reasons.
Because I don't care if you're male or female. If you're chasing OER bullets instead of leading soldiers, they can tell.
And everybody can tell.
Yep.
I completely agree.
I was always given troops like on the outside looking in now. I always knew like all the little specifics about my troops, whereas my male peers, even if I was like technically as efficient as them, they didn't know like little things about their troops, where like I could just pick up quickly that something was off, and then I would be like, okay, we're going to pause this load so that we can fix whatever mentally is where you're at, because you're not mentally here right now. And so I knew that I was getting troops where who was above me could tell like, hey, they need like a little something else.
Well, and I think that ability is really important, especially for leading this new generation of soldiers that are coming in, where they, I can remember as a lieutenant, I only spoke to my battalion commander if I was in trouble or he was giving me a medal. Like it really wasn't a lot of, hey sir, how you doing? Can I have breakfast with you type of thing. When I was a battalion commander, the young lieutenants, they craved feedback and wanting to talk, and it was nice. I really didn't mind it. Let's talk about life. Okay, you're thinking about getting out of the Army and going to law school. What's that look like? Okay, but I do think generationally that is a little bit different. So being able to pick up on those nuances and understand that soldier, that subordinate is not just a number or a last name, but as a whole person, matters a lot.
I'm just curious too then about like the enlisted or the NCO to officer, has that made better improvements, or there was a time frame there were officers, especially those young and everything, just weren't perceived to be ready. And so the senior enlisted, there were senior enlisted pockets, and then there were the officer pockets, and they didn't always blend together until we went out to the field. And so that was the only time frame. If we weren't in the field and we were in garrison, it was pretty much just the NCOs, and the officers were off.
I think there's still, I can't speak for you right now, but I think there's still NCO business. I think there's still officer business, but I don't think it's as hard-lined as it used to be.
That's what I was curious.
I always lump it all under leader business. And I
safe answer, Jim.
Yes. And in fairness too, I'm a bad person to ask this question to, because I have been just totally blessed with phenomenal senior NCOs at every step in my career, whether it was my platoon sergeant, my first sergeant, a guy named Jason Mackey, who was just phenomenal. My ops sergeant major as a S3, my battalion, I had two great battalion sergeant majors, the current armor school sergeant major. I've only ever had really strong NCOs, and I've been really fortunate to be in great units that were just filled.
Who's the current armor school sergeant major?
Sergeant Major Petty.
Petty. Okay.
Yeah.
It was it Tony Towns before that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I knew Towns. I've never met Petty before.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. Just again, just another great leader. Came up in the GWAT, has done all the things, and the type of individual that if you want to know what right looks like, you just got to look and just watch what he does, and it's the right thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's talk about now some of the stuff. I mean, right now they're going through M1A2 is what they're getting trained on and everything. But what is? I mean, I was on the original M1A1, so we're now on A2, but a mod of the A2. Where are we going in terms of the future for tanks? Because it's an outdated model in a lot of different ways.
It is. It's still a phenomenal capability that we have.
absolutely, yeah.
We absolutely have the best armor force in the world, in the history of the world. But some decisions have been made recently in the past year or so for the direction the Army's going to go. And Army senior leaders have decided on some various modernization efforts that we're going to partake over the next 10 to 20 years or so. Some are still being fleshed out how that's going to look. But for the Armor Force, really there's three big things that have changed from a material perspective. The first one is we have our first new tank in a long time, which is the M10 Booker, which is being fielded to the 82nd Airborne Division right now. It's was referred to as mobile protected firepower before. Wow. Yes. And Yep. We can go there.
Bleeding from the ears. What did you just say? Can we back
go there?
that up?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The new tank went to the 82nd.
Went to the 82nd. It did.
Okay.
Yes.
I saw it happen in the A team where they were slipping with a tank.
A little bit different. A little bit different. Yeah. No. So what we're going to do is, right now, the Army's on the hook for 5 or 6 battalions. I forget what it is, but there was a capability gap that was identified probably about a decade or so ago. I think it was a major in the 82nd when we started talking about this, where infantry brigade combat teams needed something to provide mobile protected firepower to them, and the Booker is that. So it looks like a tank. It's got a turret. Some of the old traditional tankers don't want to call it a tank, but I mean, to the Cav guy, looks like a tank. Yeah. It's got a main gun on it, and the Booker companies are going to be aligned against various brigades. So the 82nd is going to get them. The 101st will get a battalion. We'll have one in Europe. We'll have one aligned against the Pacific.
That was my next question. Like, there's got to be one in
more rapid forward. Organization,
right?
But it's not meant to fight against tanks. It's meant to reduce bunkers or
direct fire.
Exactly.
So we're looking at like maybe a second or third wave on a airfield seizure type thing, like
maybe.
Okay, we probably can't. We might edit that out. But okay, we'll talk offline. But I'm wondering, like sitting there thinking, like, okay, where does this come in? Like when does this? Okay,
I mean, just think about how heavy that is, and think about how many C-17s that would require.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So other than the Booker,
so that's a solution for now. That's something that this.
You think that's more of a stopgap than what it's going to be?
100%. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that is a solution for right now. And we're starting to field those formations. We're starting to man them now. And by FY25, we'll start filling those formations out.
So can we can have a master gunner that is also a jump master at this point.
We do have.
Well, we already have those, but I know 82nd got rid of their div master gunner. They bring that back.
I don't know. I don't know what the Mike Golf situation is going to be in the 82nd. I would imagine though with this now, you
have to have that capability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're going to train it, you have to have
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So getting back to the other question though, what the future looks like, the Army has made a decision that instead of continuing to upgrade the current M1 series, we're going to look towards a leap in technology and sort of jump to a new main battle tank. We're calling the M1E3 is the terminology for it now. Still very conceptual. I have not been part of that process, the R&D process at all.
Tesla been engaged in this?
I couldn't tell you. But
that new truck looks very similar to
right? I know, yeah.
I don't know if Elon Musk can get a top secret clearance. I don't know if he's qualified.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to leave that one alone. But it will be a leap in technology. We're looking at it going to from a 4-man crew to a 3-man crew, which is that causes some consternation. The autoloader, and then just some of the other emerging technologies that are out there. We think is going to enhance this and make it, not just better, but a order of magnitude better. So that's the tank, and then for the Bradley, we are looking at what we refer to as the XM30, which is the I don't want to call it the Bradley replacement because it's so much better than the Bradley. Both from the fire control system, the weapon system itself, a configurable payload, all the suites of everything else that we can add to this is just going to make it an exponentially better platform. But they're big and they're heavy.
Did we make them shorter?
It costs a lot of money. I can't answer that. But and it's going to take some time to get this stuff into the force. So for the near future, for the next, we say the Army of 2030 is going to look a lot like the Army of 2024. And I think as we get into the 2030s, we'll start seeing some of these technologies.
So it sounds like then at that case with an auto loader, you're going to put like the E1 through E3 as a driver, and then once they make maybe E4 or sergeant gunner, or
maybe. I honestly, we are still working through what the grade plate analysis.
What do you guys do now? Because back in the day, that's what we did. We actually put the lowest man on the total pole as the loader.
Correct.
So you guys are still training in that type of way or in units. Okay.
Yes, but coming out of OSIT though, our young privates are licensed on the tanks.
Sure.
So they're ready to get and plug and
Everything
play.
but TC.
Exactly.
Everything but tank commander. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so it's definitely a neat time for the Army. The Army as a whole is looking at these emerging technologies. We're paying very close attention to what's happening overseas, obviously, and making sure that we're not confusing TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures for doctrine. So there's definitely lessons we can get out of there, but we want to make sure we're learning the right lessons, and we're not just sort of jumping from one thing to another.
That's a great transition into something like, we got this new thing, drones, that's being used over in Ukraine. Now that we're going to be getting a new armor vehicle, not only does it affect the troops on the ground, but also armor from the air as well.
Absolutely.
So,
when's the last time we actually had to worry about enemy air?
No, it's a long time.
Long time.
We've owned the airspace for a long time.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's changing. We see it in Ukraine with the the first person viewable types of drones that they have out there, even small munitions on these small little racing drones that they have. It's definitely a game changer. It's definitely a added aspect that we're having to think about, and we are at Fort Moore. We have a small UAS course that we're running. We're incorporating UAV concepts and UAVs themselves, and everything from Ranger School into OSIT, planning with a lot of our officer PME, and we anticipate that growing. We anticipate doing more of that in the coming years because it is important, and it is something that all of our soldiers need to be aware of.
So we're just like throwing drones up there on the range and trying to hit them with a can round, like, with a tank or something, like you're playing duck hunt.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like, what's the
what's the defense?
That intermediate airspace is so dangerous.
It sounds crazy, but I mean, like,
that intermediate airspace is the stuff that gets tankers killed.
Absolutely. It's tough, and that's something that we're can't really go into a lot about it, but that is something that we are all thinking about and actively working towards on a regular basis.
Well, that's good. We heard that from Ranger School that was something they had definitely changed. But I don't know if you guys saw the recent manta ray looking unmanned submarine.
UUV, right?
That thing looked wicked in the water. So, I mean, again, all types of ways in which they're looking at not having humans, which makes sense because of recruiting challenges as well that are going on out there. I was going to ask you, are we filling all the billets and all the slots for these OSIT positions?
We are still, as an Army, and I don't have the current numbers, we're still having some recruiting challenges at this point.
Are there more gaps in particular areas than not?
I'd have to talk to the recruiting command people specifically. I know for us, within the armor branch, based on some structure changes in the Army with the Cav squadrons, the IBCT, the Infantry Brigade Combat Team, and the Stryker Brigade Combat Team Cav squadrons going away, we're able to recoup some of those 19 series spaces and move them to other areas. We have increased our 19 kilo, so our tanker accessions over the past year or so. Some really good work with our OSIT.
So the kilos that transferred to deltas, now the deltas are transferring to kilos.
Yes.
So this is Cav to tank to Cav.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, right now, most of our deltas, if a 19 Delta wants to stay a 19 Delta can stay as a 19 Delta. There are plenty of homes that we can do that. So that hasn't been an issue. We're not force reclassing anybody at this point. We're also bringing on a new MOS, the 19 Charlie, which is the Bradley Crewman. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, so think old 11 Mike, how that went away.
Oh my gosh, you're going to bring back mechanized again?
Yeah, well, the armor branch has now taken proponency of the Bradley. So the driver, the gunner, and the Bradley commander on Bradleys moving forward are going to be 19 Charlies. So we are allowing reclass to that right now. We have a number of folks from other MOSs other than the 19 series have volunteered to become 19 Charlies. They want to stay on Bradleys, which has been great. Yes, I believe there's still a pretty good bonus that's happening at the time as well for it. But that's something we're excited about, and that had come out of a 3-corps lethality study where we identified some gaps a few years ago about our capability in the mechanized force. And as a branch, we feel like allowing our NCOs to become real subject matter experts on the Bradleys is just going to be better for the armor force in the future.
We need utility leaders. I mean, those who are flexible that can go to different types of branches within the military, be able to do that. Go, whether you're a 19 kilo in your armor, you can go to Delta, you can go to Charlie, you can go to 11 Bravo, you can go 11 Chuck, whatever. Why can't we get more of that utility? We're going to need that.
Sure.
So you can level load as a commander.
Yeah. And I think it's a mix, right? I think it's a mix between, I think baseball, for example, like, I want a middle infielder that I can, move around a little bit. I want the guy that I can
pitcher, center fielder.
Yeah. I want the guy I can play at third. I want him, to play center field, maybe at first, but I want a really good pitcher. And I just want that pitcher to be able to, pitch. That's it. I want him, and that's what I want. So it's, in my mind, in the Army, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I definitely want some leaders that can move and can adapt and can be agile. But at the same time, there's places where we need actual real subject matter expertise.
There's some Bradley Mike Goffs out there that have been screaming this for 20 years right now.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the problem that we've had with my generation in the GWAT is that we lost some of our subject matter expertise in combined arms warfare.
Oh yeah.
So when you think back to the old staff sergeant I used to have who could fix anything on the Brad, that's not the norm these days. But in fairness, it's not just our NCOs. I mean, again, I'm the deputy commandant of the armor school, and you want me to plan a combined arms breach. It's going to take me a minute I'll get it done, but it's not intuitive like it was 20 years ago for an armor colonel to be able to do some of these things. So I think as a professional Army, we're having to take a hard look at ourselves and realize, yes, we're the best Army in the world. Yes, we're the U.S. Army and we do all these wonderful things, but we can always be better.
But if you're not taking a hard look, you're not the best Army in the world.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's be honest with ourselves. Let's find the gaps in our holes in our swing, and then let's address it. And that, as an armor force, that's what we're trying to do right now: is really be honest with ourselves and get better.
Do you think that the armored force that you came into is the same one that you're leaving?
That's a good one.
Yes, because you joined. You were a green suiter, right?
Yeah,
you had woodland camo. You probably ran in Korea. You probably ran a telephone wire around the patrol base or whatever, the vehicle patrol base.
Yeah,
I was a GWAT baby. We didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
We dug in. We did infantry tactics. We learned reconnaissance.
Sure.
We did command wire sweeps and route clearance, and I didn't really, like I said, I'd never learned to be strategic until I got to a true armor brigade.
Right. Well, and I think too, in the GWAT, we made some decisions with structure because we were focused on battle space owners, right? So we had, we were very focused on brigades because brigades owned, provinces, for lack of a better term, in Iraq and Afghanistan. Whereas now the Army has made a decision to focus our efforts at the division level and the corps level. So how we actually think we would fight large-scale ground combat operations, it's not going to be a bunch of brigades just out there doing their thing. It's going to be the synchronization of assets at echelon. It's going to be right, and it's going to be a lot. So as an Army, I don't. I think there's a lot that we've forgotten, but I don't think we're.
Is it necessary to be forgotten to learn new tactics for the? Advances.
It was for GWAT, I believe.
Yeah, maybe. I think we're still close enough that we can dust the things off and not necessarily try to reinvent or go back to what we were in the 90s. I think that would be a mistake. We don't need to completely revert back to 30 years.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of goodness in the doctrine there that now we just need to shake off and take a look at what the
Yeah.
current operating environment is, and then apply some of those changes.
Because I really don't have much context to armored at all.
Sure.
But what you're talking about is very likened to, I noticed a change in the Air Force when we were losing legacy jets like the F-16s, F-15s, A-10s, and going into fifth gen, so F-35, F-22. And it was kind of like the old school had to leave and that it wasn't needed anymore. And
Yeah.
there was like very
Okay.
much a culture where it was frustrating, but everybody was like, what does it matter?
Sure. No, I can see that. And I think there's definitely places where the Army does need to change and evolve.
Yeah.
And probably evolution is probably the right word for that.
Yeah.
But that's not to say everything that we did in the past was wrong.
Right.
We just need to take a look at it and have a clear-eyed assessment of what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's a good lead in to like with the stuff that's going on in the world today.
Sure.
I mean, it's very much like the 90s, like the 80s of the Cold War era, and Cold War had never ended.
Trench warfare and massed fires. I mean, it sounds like World War I to me.
Yeah,
Right.
There's far more threat of a symmetric war now than I think there was
Yeah.
when we joined
Well, and
in the decade in which we joined.
yeah, and also too, if we're real about ground combat, at some point, some squad is doing a frontal assault. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're the Roman Legion or if you're us.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a very personal. Combat's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
So we have changes in technology. We have all these new things that are out there. But it's going to be some 19-year-old with a rifle, facing off against another 19-year-old with a rifle somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what we're trying to train as well, is what that reality of they say they call it the last 100 yards sometimes, but what does that actually look like? And especially for us at Fort Moore, where the predominance of the we call it the close combat force is going to come through either for institutional training or some sort of functional training. That's very much something that we think about a lot.
So would you say like the new recruits coming in the Army have a lot more responsibility where they need to have all that same combative like head to head and then also have all the technical advances and be a subject matter expert on new technologies?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I don't know yet. I think we're still figuring that out. I think, I don't think we have enough data yet to really know what that looks like. Now, my sense of it is both, yes, that we are going to ask them to do more.
That's what it sounds like from the outside.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot.
I think so, but at the same time, I remind myself that I think back to being a platoon leader in Iraq and calling for fire and having either Apaches or Kiowas flying, talking on the radio, having this new computer system that's up and running, and there was a lot more than what maybe a platoon leader did in Vietnam. I never felt overwhelmed by it because the training was there, and that was just sort of what I came up with and expected to use. So I do wonder. UAS is a great example. Right now, we're talking about do we need a new MOS? Do we need an additional skill identifier for our soldiers that are going to be employing small UAS? And then I go home and I watch my kids and I see my boys playing with something and they can have, whatever it is up in the air and they're not even thinking twice about it. So I do think the cognitive ability of this next generation is going to be...
It's more deep.
It's going to be more of a given.
They're going to be perfectly capable of handling that
Like
load.
the grenades the size of the baseball because everybody can throw a baseball.
Right.
So the controller for the UAV is the size of an Xbox controller because everybody has an
Absolutely.
Xbox.
Absolutely.
So it might not even be like in need of an identifier.
Right.
It's not special
It's
at this
just- it's
point.
just what they do.
Everyone can do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're edging into a world now where like the younger generations totally understand the technology well beyond
Sure.
those of us who've moved beyond that.
Sure.
We're, we're getting back to trench warfare where we probably never should have left it. It's a part of a capability that the enemy always has. So we don't always get we all know this saying, we don't always get to choose all the roles. The enemy gets a vote in the outcome.
Absolutely.
So, we have to make sure that we understand all those various concepts as a leader, especially to apply different concepts to different strategies to make sure that the outcome goes in our favor.
I agree. Yeah, I'd say I think one of the things that we're doing really well, especially with our captains. So lieutenants, yes, we want lieutenants to know how to maneuver platoons. Very, very simple. Like I care a lot about your tactical ability and technical expertise, yes, but I want you to be able to to fight a platoon. For our captains, that's really where the application of the combined arms fight starts coming together. So I care less about telling you what to think. I want you to learn how to think. And I think that's something that's done. The American Army has done really well for a very long time. We're building adaptive leaders that are able to grasp the complexity of a situation and then distill that down into what needs to happen. So in terms of what we're actually training them on, we are evolving that. We're changing the operating environment. We're changing, we're modernizing the different what do you call them, scenarios that they're going through to have a more modern, realistic construct behind it. But in terms of the doctrine piece and everything else, that's takes some time, and we're evolving with it. And I'll also kind of sort of come back to, at the end of the day, if you do the fundamentals well, going back to football, if you're blocking and tackling, if you can execute a trap, if you could whatever it is, you're going to be okay. If you're able to do it faster than your adversary is. And I think that's one of the things as the American Army, we need to make sure we're not getting so caught up in a bunch of shiny objects that we're losing sight of what the fundamental nature of ground combat looks like. And if we can do that, and if we can execute a good enough plan violently and fast, we'll be fine.
Yeah. Makes total sense. So, in looking at, this next war and everything else, what do you see that's probably going to be one of our greatest challenges moving forward as a nation, especially as an armor?
Logistics.
Always is, right?
Always is.
Can you feed your troops?
Can you supply them?
And we don't. It's been a while since we fought a home game. We're an expeditionary force, and when we look at where potential hotspots are, whether it's in the Middle East or Europe or the Pacific is massive. Just logistics in general is really hard. It's really hard, and I think that's something as well that we certainly don't get it right. Or we don't get it perfect all the time, but the Army's pretty good at logistics. We're relative to our peers, we're pretty good.
The places that combat outposts were in Afghanistan and the fact that they stayed supplied is amazing to me.
Right.
Like you were in some place that a car can't go. The goat had a trouble getting up here. Like
Sure.
And we have generators up here. We have a chow hall. We have
Yeah.
They do the logisticians across the Army. That's like one of the things that no one really pays attention to. But as an armor officer, you had to be a logistician as an XO.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
You had to take that armor off, and then you had to put on the distro platoon leader type role and give people things.
Yeah, and it got to the point where I would fight for. Again, going back to just being as fortunate as I have in my career, my forward support company commanders, I'd fight for the best one in the BSB, and I got them.
Yeah.
So my forward support company, I would fight to have a great S4 that I wanted as a logistician, and that was always a win whenever I could do that, because if the logistics was taken care of, then the formation would be. But to your point about the combat outposts and things, and sort of our generation. Fighting in and out of a COP, fighting in and out of a FOB, that is something that we're looking at, ensuring our soldiers are aware that constant resupply isn't necessarily going to be there. You have to be able to resupply yourself.
Yes.
Not being able to go back to your chew, not being able to go back and refit. The days of just having 3 magazines across your plate carrier, that's probably not enough.
Yep.
Bring more ammo. And when we start talking robotics and we start talking about AI and some of the other things that are out there, those are applications that I see semi-autonomous systems helping us a lot with predictive logistics, being able to get the resupply to us, being able to get that, ammo, fuel, and then Cavalry. That's another one. We never really had to worry about not being within the golden hour. I worry a lot about what casualty evacuation looks like in big fights.
Absolutely.
You talk a lot about these robotics and everything, but then I also worry about, again, the enemy gets a vote in terms of how that happens. So you can shut them down, Matter of fact, you can drop a bomb in a atmosphere not even that high, and
absolutely,
and knock everything out.
Sure.
So I remember, like, seeing a lot of soldiers that were using so much electronics in terms of where they needed to go and GPS, and they forgot how to just use a protractor and a damn compass.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely a problem. When I was a battalion commander out in Hawaii, we had to take a very deliberate approach to land nav, just basic land nav. I mean, I'm wearing a Garmin right now that can tell me everything I need to know, but what happens if it doesn't work? So going back to analog watches, going back to a map and a compass, that sort of goes back to what I was getting at with some of the things that we have forgotten a little bit, but not so much that we can't relearn it and get it back. So yeah, land navigation.
I was going to say even landline and field phone. I mean, the whole old way of doing things sometimes are better and safer communication than trying to use electronics.
Absolutely. Well, and being able to be targeted within the electromagnetic spectrum is a reality.
Yeah.
So how do we train that? And these are all things we're talking about with our leaders. This is all stuff that comes up. Everything from OSIT with our privates and basic training through the battalion commanders and the pre-command course is the realities of the current operating environment and things that we need to think about. Now, I'm not saying we need to completely get rid of all technology because of that stuff, but understanding the pros, the cons, the strengths, the weaknesses, and how you can mitigate what risk you're assuming when are all things that we're asking our leaders to think about.
Yeah. One of the best leaders I had was an individual that actually would take the technology away from us and force us to have to use the old school blocking and tackling techniques to still accomplish the mission.
That's a great technique.
How is funding these days? Because I would imagine everybody's always fighting for the same dollars.
We are. Yeah. So the Army's budget's flatline, which means with inflation, our spending power has actually gone down, and it's tough. We're having to make a lot of decisions. The Army leaders are having to make a lot of decisions about what we're going to fund and why. And as an Army, I think rightfully so, we're making some decisions about modernization, which we need to do. In order for us to either keep pace or stay ahead of our adversaries, there's some modernization concerns that we have that we need to address. And I think the current Chief of Staff of the Army and his goals with that are addressing that. Now, what that means is that money needs to come from somewhere. So where does that come from? And that's hard. So the days of going back to Big Army and asking for end of the year funds or whatever it is are just not there anymore. We're having to make some hard decisions at Fort Moore about what we're going to fund. What I can say, though, is I have zero concerns about being able to still turn out a quality officer, NCO, or soldier. We're by no means compromising the quality of product that we're turning out to the Force Comm units. Just a lot of the nice to have things right now we're not able to get.
What keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
Ooh. I worry that it's very rare for us to start a war at our time and at the place of our choosing. I think sometimes we look at Desert Storm as the norm and not the anomaly that it was. So that worries me, and it worries me that our enemies will set conditions prior to the first shot being fired. Going back to the logistics and the tyranny of distance, when we were talking before the show about Europe, for example, 30 years ago, we had a couple divisions, a couple corps headquarters, a bunch of separate brigades, and we don't have that in Europe right now. The Pacific is a massive, massive place. And yes, we have troops on Oahu. Oahu's an awfully long way from Southeast Asia. So that stuff worries me. What doesn't worry me, though, is the quality of leaders that we have in the force right now. Though we haven't fought large-scale ground combat operations, I think the folks that we've got in leadership positions, and who we have the bench coming behind us are just phenomenal Americans that are going to do a wonderful job. We just need to put them in a position to be successful.
I don't think the act of combat is going to be the hard thing. We've been practicing that for 20 years.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's, taking the first shot across the bow and then spitting some blood on the ground and then figuring some stuff out. But I don't think combat's going to be the hard part.
Yeah.
I don't know, Rob, what do you think? I mean, we've been doing it for so long now.
Well, I mean, repetition is good in that sense.
Right,
But
right.
I guess I fear a lot of the new technologies and a lot of the changes that are going on, like you said, fighting on multiple fronts. You know, I mean, recently NATO put out an announcement of, you know, gearing up, and rightfully so. It just became more of news of evaluating the current condition over in Ukraine and Russia. And we've made some serious statements that has not made them too happy. And with some of the things we've done in terms of funding Ukraine.
Right.
So it's becoming very tense. And then, of course, we've got the other, you know, organization over there, China, that's never gone away as well, that is over in Southeast Asia, like you're talking about, that is getting more and more technologically advanced with missiles that can go for longer distances that, you know, could potentially hit Hawaii, potentially hit the mainland of the U.S. So, you know, trying to think of all these different things all at one time frame as a commander, especially at a very high level, to try to figure out the way, like you were talking about logistics, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Well, I think your point too about the changing technology. You know, going back to drones, for example, I wonder if 30 years from now, we look back at drones, kind of how they did with the machine gun in the First World War, for example. So the stat is completely not right. I don't know what it is. I'm sort of paraphrasing here. But if I remember correctly, British infantry battalions in like 1914, 1915 had like 2 machine guns or something like that. And then by the end of the war, they had recognized how important this was. And then we had machine gun battalions out there. I do worry that we might not fully grasp the extent at which some of these emerging technologies are going to impact how ground combat happens. And I worry that an adversary will grasp that faster than us. So we spend a lot of time thinking and talking about this type of stuff because we don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah. I think also some of my concerns is that maybe we don't recognize the potential or the benefits at times as conventional service of special operations. And I mean, we think of them as an us and them as an us and them type of thing. But special operations serves its purpose, and especially during the you know, global war on terror, 20 years, we ramped up our special forces. We ramped up a lot of different capabilities. I mean, you saw 75th Ranger Regiment grow in terms of their RMIB, their Military Intelligence Battalion. You know, a lot of different capabilities that commanders needed at their fingertips at that time frame. But I've also heard that we're looking at drawing down some of those soft capabilities. That kind of concerns me because I think there is a need always, especially for what, let's say, Green Beret Special Forces do in, you know, training, you know, other countries and stuff to have capabilities to be able to aid us when we need that.
Yeah. So no, I think you're right. And I think that's one of the things that we're looking at as an Army is how do we right size those things, right? So, you know, I am, again, I'm a conventional guy. You know, have a little bit of time in that other realm. And, you know, certainly have a lot of really good friends that are over there. And I think as we look at, in particular, those mission sets for special operations in particular, what are the things that we really need special operations, you know, operators to do? What are the things that only they can do is sort of, you know, sort of question number one I have. And then in terms of some of the training aspects, I think there's definitely, I mean, there's always gonna be a role for the SF groups doing that. But recently we have stood up our Security Force Assistance Brigades, which is supposed to cover some of that stuff. And then just to be honest, I've spent a lot of time as a conventional guy training Iraqis, you know, to do a whole lot of things. So I don't necessarily think we have to have a special operations force to do all things. I think we can do a better job holistically as an Army to allow them to do the things that only they can do, whether it's, you know, foreign internal defense or UW or special reconnaissance, or, you know, sort of name your flavor of that. And as we were talking about before, as an armor force, we're losing a lot of our reconnaissance and security capability with the loss of our Cav squadrons. We're going to need somebody to do some of that type of stuff for us as well. And when
big R and big S don't go away.
Roger that. Just because you don't have a formation that does that, absolutely. But it's not just us. I mean, the Marines just they just graduated their last Scout Sniper course just a little while ago. That's no longer a thing for them, which I never thought would happen. Yikes! Yeah, it's a big deal. So I think as an Army, we are going to have continue to have hard conversations about what our force structure needs to look like, and then frankly, what we can afford.
So looking at that back in the day, sorry, Caitlin.
No.
So looking at it back in the day, there was a lot more like long range reconnaissance
Right.
and long range patrols and stuff.
You
There
had LERP and
they were
Colt
actually
teams and that.
they were actually part of the company. They may be a platoon, third platoon, fourth platoon, or whatever. And
Yeah.
do you think those kind of capabilities are going to get back into the conventional forces or a blend thereof?
I don't know. I think, in my heart, I'd want it. I'm a light cav guy.
Yeah,
I like that
that'd be
stuff.
sweet.
Yes.
Right, especially if you're airborne. And
I was going to say,
everything,
I'd do another 10 years if you let me do that stuff. It's just,
make it your idea, Jim.
yeah, I know. There we go. Yeah, I don't think we need a colonel doing that. We are standing things up called multi-domain task force. We have, I think reconnaissance, surveillance, certainly. There's going to be a larger role for robotics, unmanned systems. I think a lot of, I think the guys we're going to have doing this aren't necessarily. Let me rephrase. I think they're going to be more in the sensor emplacement business than anything else. How are they getting the right sensor into the right location to collect the right data that talks to the right people that then uses somebody else's weapon system to kill? I think that's the direction we're going.
It's the old adage: the biggest weapon that a scout has is a
the
radio.
Yeah, right.
It's the same thing, but it's just you're getting, whatever form of contact you need to confirm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And looking at that across the spectrum. And I do think that's a role, I think it's a necessary role for special operations, in particular at the corps level and above. I don't see conventional forces necessarily doing that type of reconnaissance. Maybe at the division level, maybe, but it's with the way, with the persistent sensors, everything from the UAS to thermals to the spectrum to everything else, I think it's going to be really hard for conventional forces to do that. I do think that will be a role for special operations in the future.
At some point, you're going to get out of the Army. What are you going to do after?
Oh, geez, that's a hard one.
It's coming.
It is. It's coming fast. It's coming really fast. So I had the really good fortune of being the Army Fellow at the U.S. Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C. last year. And that was great. It was a great year. And just in general, what that place is, it's a congressionally chartered organization that sits right off of the Lincoln Memorial. And in essence, their job is to think about peace and how can you promote it worldwide. Obviously for U.S. interests, but it stemmed out of a number of congressmen that had been World War II vets in the late 70s, saying that we spent all this money on defense, all this money on thinking about war. We're not spending any money on prevention. So I had the good fortune of working with a lot of foreign service officers, USAID individuals, folks from various nonprofits, and it was this wonderful mix of pragmatic reality and like hopeful optimism, sort of all mashed into one. I've been in a lot of combat. There were some foreign service officers and some UN individuals that had seen a whole lot worse than anything I'd ever seen, that took a really real approach to things. And I think that's the space I want to be in when I get out of the Army. I've spent 22 or so years, becoming a quote unquote expert in warfare. I'd like to do something to try to help others, whether that's, here at home. I think there's a lot of really good opportunities, in our country where we need people to sort of bring people together, or around the world. But, something still service related, something that's still sort of giving back. And, it's always been important to me. And, I'm hoping to find something like that when I get out.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. What I've heard you kind of say throughout this interview is like your confidence in the human factors of the Army, and that's what you speak most highly of. Yeah. But then with inflation and budget issues, are you worried about retaining any of those human factors that you're giving so much confidence into? I
am. We've changed the way we do retirement. So I'm part of the legacy retirement, where get to 20 and get 50% and all that type of stuff, which is wonderful. We now have a blended retirement system where it's, I forget what the percentage is, but it's less and it's more onus on the individual to.
Did they go down to like 30?
It's essentially a 401k.
Yeah, it's,
right?
it's pretty much. So, which makes me wonder. I mean, I don't know if I would have stayed in the Army at 14 years in as a major, just rowing hard on a battalion staff. I mean, it's hard. It is hard on families. It is hard on relationships. It's hard on kids.
Yeah.
A big reason I took the job that I did at Fort Moore was stability for my kids. I've got rising freshmen. I want to get them through high school in one location. And I think too, generationally as well, with a lot more dual income families. With it is common for military spouses to be the primary income earner in that family, not the service member, which is a very big difference than it was 40 or so years ago. All of those things are going to play into it, and I think too with the new generation as well, they have to feel like what they're doing matters and it's important. And I think we're okay with that right now in the Army, but it does worry me with some of the distractions that can be out there that they'll lose sight of that and they'll forget why they chose to serve.
Is that kind of like your 2 cents to leaders on your out, like that are younger leaders, to like help motivate them for their why?
Absolutely. If you can explain the why, amazing things will happen by your soldiers. Absolutely.
Jim, appreciate you coming up here to.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that long of a drive. What, an hour and a half?
Yeah, it was nice. It was good reason for me to get out of the office on Friday.
Get away from privates.
Yeah. This was awesome. Thank you again. I appreciate you reaching out and appreciate the time.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.